Another brisk morning this morning. Boy, at least there's no wind. Not sure how cold it is. It just feels bitchin' cold. Probably minus 15 or so. Nothing that a hot coffee can't help. My winter fans are on idle, as you can hear. Just nicely displacing the wintershed air inside. I've been speaking to a lot of interesting fellows online about CO2 and levels within their sheds, and talking to a bunch of guys who have indoor wintering bees. I find it really fascinating. We have all these questions and they're doing little experiments, beekeeping experiments. So all this CO2 talk I gotta watch, or my government's gonna come down and try to tax me on it. But what I'm gonna do today is I'm gonna turn the fans off in the shed. The ventilation fans. I'm gonna keep the ceiling fans on just to make sure that the air within the sheds circulates and doesn't layer. But I just wanna see what kind of a bounce of my CO2 levels in the shed. So I'm just going to grab my CO2 detector, this nifty little thing. I noticed a lot of other beekeepers that I've been talking to use this little device because it's fairly cheap, like it's 120 bucks or something like that, and it just does what we need it to do. I got my nifty little light on here. Just gotta, here we go. Just gonna go into the winter shed now. And we'll just take a reading of what's going on in this room. And as you can see, it's 1846, relative humidity of 39% and about 5 degrees Celsius. I'm going to turn the fans off now, and I'm going to let this room sit for a few hours, and I'm going to come back and see what the differences are. Exhaust fans here, and the shed is silent. Like I say, I still have the ceiling fans on just to make sure that there's no air layering in the shed. All I want to see is with the exhaust fan off, how long it takes to increase my CO2 level, increase my temperature, and at what level. So I'll come back in about an hour and a half now, and the carbon dioxide is raised substantially to about 4,782 parts per million. The humidity inside the sheds got raised up to 62%, and my temperature is not really changing much. It's just under 7 degrees Celsius. So these levels are climbing indeed. There's not really much happening in the shed though. These bees are pretty silent, pretty much the same. I'm going to come back. I have a little bit more work to do with maintenance on this tractor, so I'll come back in about an hour and I'll see where the levels are at that point. So I'm gonna go end the trial. It's been about 3.5 hours. I just want to see what my levels are at. There's the old saying, curiosity killed the cat. So I don't want to overdo this. I'll just go see their monitor here. What do we have here? Okay. So we have a shed that is at 8,500 parts per million carbon dioxide at 68, just about 70% humidity and 7 degrees Celsius. So that has shown that the CO2 levels have dramatically increased to dangerous levels. That is after 3.5 hours of no ventilation. The temperature hasn't really increased a whole lot, but the humidity has. The humidity's gone up almost double. So the fan is ramped up. Well
off idle. So it'll take maybe half an hour to purge out the air, bring it back down to temperature, and I'll come back in about an hour to see what my CO2 levels are in there. Just back in the shed, and it's 1635 parts per million, and the relative humidity is back down to 30%. Absolutely calm until I wake him up here with this white light. These guys are way back there. Shed's pretty quiet.